So I'm pretty excited right now. I'm driving out to the Coeur d'Alene airport to sit down with somebody who has done the kind of flying that most of us really only ever dream about. Mike Kincaid spent decades up in Alaska as a state trooper, flew all kinds of airplanes, Super Cubs, 185s, 206s, landed on all kinds of airstrips, lakes, rivers, just did incredible flying. And combined with his role as a trooper up there, he came out of Alaska with just amazing stories. So I want to sit down with him and dig into those stories from Alaska. I also want to talk to him about the books that he's written, the articles he's written. He's done a lot of other really interesting things too, and I hope to get into that. So anyway, without further ado, meet Mike. Mike, appreciate you taking the time. I know of your career and then your time since moving from Alaska down here, but I don't know anything prior to you being in Alaska. Like, I've never heard the story of how you actually got started flying.
I was born in California, but I was very young. I had no decision in that. Um, and I had the most unlikely start to aviation. You want me to tell you about it?
Yeah.
So most people I know that got in aviation because they'd go look through the airport fence and, got into the aviation by observing planes. And then they got their first ride with somebody, fun. Mine, I was in school, I think second grade, and it was in California, which I was born. We moved out of California, I think,
Where
when
in
I was
California?
5, Burbank.
Oh, okay.
So I was at school and I was watching these two planes, and one was a transport plane, and the other one was military jet. And I was watching them fly above me, and on a beautiful day, and like it always is in California, and they collided above me, mid-air collision. So that was my introduction to aviation. So the big plane, the transport plane, went zooming past me, and I heard it crash, big ball of fire. The other plane spiraled down, went behind the mountains, just like a movie. In fact, I was thinking, this is like a movies I watch, and it spiraled behind the mountain and blew up. A guy parachuted out of the fighter plane. He was a radio man, as it turns out, and he was trying to land on our school ground. But it was so windy that he ended up in trees by a Safeway store, I believe it was Safeway, down from our school. He survived with burns and broken legs. Unfortunately, the transport plane ended up in another school and killed numerous kids on the playground and injured a lot of kids, burned a lot of kids. So it was tragic for them. Only thing our school happened was a lot of pieces, mostly foil and that kind of stuff, ended up on our playground. And I collected that and took it home, and they made us bring it back to school the next day. But that was my introduction to aviation. So I was terrified of airplanes.
How old were you?
I think I was 8.
Okay.
So when we moved to Texas, my mother had to drag me screaming, I'm sure, onto that 707 because I had no interest in getting on an airplane. I was terrified. I figured they were all going to crash. So I had no interest at all in airplanes. And I went to SMU, got accepted to their law program, which is a 5-year law program.
SMU.
Southern Methodist University in Dallas. Ended up having to transfer to University of Texas because of my scholarship. All kinds of problems. Nothing I did, but it's a long story. But I ended up going to UT, and I'd never taken a vacation my whole life. Didn't know what that was all about. And somebody said, "Why don't you?" I was racing motocross on weekends, so I said, "Why don't you go to Oregon and race?" So I did the circuit all the way to Oregon. And I got to Oregon, and some guy said, "Why don't you go to Alaska since you're this close?" And I said, "Well, I never thought about Alaska. It sounded like a nice drive." So I sold my bike to pay trip to Alaska, drove to Alaska, was going to go back to law school in the fall, and I just flat out fell in love with Alaska. Ended up working at McKinley Park for the summer, did 2 jobs there, and stayed at a campground in the park, so saw this tremendous amount of wildlife all the time and fell in love with Alaska.
So did you ever go back and finish your
No,
degree?
no. Oh, I was going to in the winter. I was ready to go back, and I was in Anchorage at a campground, and I was looking through the paper at jobs just for fun, and I saw Alaska Airlines is hiring at the ski resort. They owned Alaska Ski Resort. So I said, well, the job's for an auditor. So I went and got a book at the bookstore and read what an auditor does. So I went in and convinced the person who was interviewing me that I knew all about auditing, and they hired me as the auditor and night desk clerk at the ski resort. So basically, when I started out, it was an old computer built into a cash register. It was an NCR system, horrible system. Had no idea what I was doing, but I learned it after a while. And I could do the audit in 45 minutes, take a nap, close the hotel, the door, take a nap, and get up and ski all day. And that's where I learned to ski. And being Alaska Airlines owned it, I got flight privileges. And I think the only place I went was Nome. But I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. So so all these airline crews would come in. And so I got to know a lot of the airline crews, all the different airlines, and they would have parties there and ski tournaments and so forth. So that's how I got to know some of the aviation people. And I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. But again, I had never thought that I would be a pilot. It just wasn't in my interest. But ended up, well, a guy came down and met me at the resort and said, hey, I'd like to hire you for my hotel business in Anchorage. I said, I don't want to go to Anchorage. That's kind of a big city. And he said, well, I'm going to be governor in 5 years. And so it's great. And the guy had a stutter. And I said, that's kind of hard to believe that, he's not great at public speaking and how he's going to be governor. But anyway, I went to work for him. And one day he said, I'm opening a new travel lodge in Whitehorse. And I want you to go meet this guy that owns the airline. And we're going to charter a plane. And we're going to have a party. I said, well, that sounds good.
So what were you doing for him, though?
He started out managing a little motel in Anchorage, and then he said, after 6 months, I'll promote you. And he promoted me to director of sales. I'm 21 years old. I had no idea what director of sales did either. But it was a great job, a lot of fun. And so he said, I want you to put on a party in Whitehorse. I said, okay. So I went and met this guy, and the guy was Bob Reeve. Bob Reeve was one of the first bush pilots in Alaska, probably the first glacier pilot. And I had no idea who he was. Just this old guy with a pipe. And anyway, we hit it off, and he told me stories about Alaska. And he said, after we do this trip, you need to go out and meet my son-in-law. I said, well, okay, great. And the son-in-law is Don Sheldon. So I got to go up and meet Don Sheldon. And that's how I got to know Don Sheldon. And his daughter was Roberta Reeve. And so that's how I got to know the Sheldons and flew with Don Sheldon.
Quickly, for anybody that doesn't know the name Sheldon.
So after Bob Reeve was the first famous glacier pilot in Alaska, Don Sheldon was next in line. It's a new generation of pilots in the 50s. Don took over, and he was like probably the most famous bush pilot of his era. Just did incredible glacier landings on Mount McKinley. He really started the glacier landings on McKinley, taking climbers up there and that sort of thing, and had some great stories. He had like 20 crashes. Bad crashes. He had a wing fall off one time in flight and survived it. Yeah. He's a great guy. And so he had a lot of stories, and we became friends. He's kind of my mentor. Yeah. So I was reading books like White Fang. I got to know White Fang personally reading books, the famous Alaska books. And so I said, I want to live in the bush. So I went back up with Don, and they had the thing called open entry, where you could go out and stake 5 acres. And then if you improved on it, build a cabin or whatever, and lived in it, on that land for a year, you owned it. So Don and I went out and surveyed with his 180. We found some property, and I dropped stakes from the air. Then I snowshoed back in, and I staked all of this land out. So I built a cabin and lived there for a whole year, trying to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I wasn't going back to law school at that point. Decided that wasn't something I was going to do. I decided I loved Alaska, and I really enjoyed living in the bush. But living out in remote, where the closest town was 12 miles by sled dog. I had a dog team. Had no idea what a dog team was, but I read books about it, so at least I had an idea. And got back and forth to town to get supplies by sled dog. And I'd go in and see Don Sheldon. I tied up my team right across from him at the bar, and I'd go do all my shopping, have a beer, and head home. And after a year, I decided, well, I'm not sure what I want to do, but I know this isn't it. So I ended up running a sawmill and started assistant guiding. And I saw the dark side of guiding in Alaska, so much abuse and illegal stuff going on.
What do you mean? Like what?
Shooting, for example, they'd go out in a super cub like this one, and they would shoot moose for bear bait, and then go back and kill bears off the bait. So you violation, you're shooting same day as airborne, you're flying and shooting, you can't do that. And then wasting meat, of course, that's a felony in Alaska. And then go and shooting animals off. So lots of violations. So there was a lot of that going on. And I saw the dark side of guiding and said, well, I know I don't want to be a guide for the rest of my life. So I went down and worked on a pipeline in Valdez, and I got to know a trooper, and I got into law enforcement because it turns out they were selling drugs. And On weekends,
Who was selling drugs?
I worked 6 10s shift. My shift was 6 10s, but I still wanted to make more money. So I was driving a cab at night and driving a taxi cab.
Okay.
Trying to make more money. And I couldn't find housing, so I managed apartments for low-income housing for the Native corporations. So I had 3 jobs going. Well, I found out what they wanted me to do with the taxi cab is deliver drugs to the pipeline workers.
Okay.
And hookers.
Okay.
I wasn't interested in either one of those careers. So I got to know a trooper. And this trooper looked like he was a poster trooper. He was like 6'5" and tall, dark, a handsome trooper. He looked like he just stepped out of a poster. And he and I became friends. And he recruited me. He said, "You need to be a trooper." And he said, "We have this new thing. It's called wildlife troopers." And he said, "With your background, and if you want to get into flying, you could be a pilot for them, and it's a great job." I said, "That sounds real interesting." So I applied and got accepted to the academy eventually. That same year, they were hiring like crazy because so many of the guys that were troopers left to go to work for the pipeline, make big bucks. So they were recruiting like crazy.
But you still didn't fly.
No, I still didn't fly. I'd been taking a few lessons off and on, but I didn't have a private pilot certificate. I probably had 30 hours at the time, just flying with Don, and he had an instructor, and so I was doing a little bit of flying, but had really not studied, had not prepared to be a pilot. So I did a little undercover work for the police department, and that's how I got really interested in law enforcement.
What was the undercover work?
Well, hookers and drugs.
Okay.
So I was already. They wanted me to drive for it, so I still kept my job, but I was really working for law enforcement at that time, and so that was exciting to me. I really liked that. So then I took it very serious about the academy. So I would ski up in the mountains every day, a cross country ski, and then I bought a 357 because that's what they issued, and I got to be a pretty good shot before the academy, and got in best physical shape. I got a picture of me over there. It was best physical shape I've ever been in. And anyway, I go to the academy and get to the academy, and I shaved my mustache. I shaved my mustache for the interview, and got to the academy, had the shortest hair I ever had since I was a little kid. And the first thing they said, "Oh, you get a haircut." And so that was my introduction to academy, and it was just strictly a full military.
Where was the academy?
Sitka.
Okay.
On the Rock. And so I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be able to take this. I want to fly around planes and have a fun job. When I got suspicious that it wasn't really going to be the wildlife work we all had blue uniforms. And the first 2 weeks was homicide investigation and then traffic. I said, oh, wait a minute.
This isn't wildlife.
And they made it very clear. They said, you all are Alaska State Troopers. If you get assigned to wildlife work, that will be your primary mission, but you still are Alaska State Troopers. So understand it. So still, I thought, okay. So the academy was, once the academy was over, it was like 3 months, I think, 3 month academy, 3 or 4. Most everybody in the academy was sent to a city post so you could get training, more advanced training. It's called field training officer training. And so you rode with experienced troopers, and they signed you off every day. Well, for me, they sent me right to King Salmon. And I had no idea. I knew it was a fish. I had no idea there was a town called King Salmon.
Where in Alaska is King Salmon? Is that?
It's western Alaska. It's by Lake Iliamna, not in the ugly part of like Bethel, but it's a little bit more south than that. But there was a military base there, an Air Force base. That's why it was there. But it was the biggest red salmon fishery in the world. And so I thought, okay, great, I'm going to get to do wildlife work and a lot of hunting. And this is wonderful. So I got there and I decided, okay, I'm going to be a wildlife trooper. I get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning. That first day, after I'd been up all night moving in, I got to the town and there was nobody to help me. I flew in a flying box car with my Ford Pinto in the back, loaded with all my household stuff. And they parked on the ramp, we unloaded, and they said, see ya. And I said, hey, do you guys know where the trooper housing is? We don't know. And they just took off, and I'm sitting there. Plane takes off with all my stuff. And so,
when you said a flying boxcar,
is
that
that's the C-19.
Yeah, okay.
All
right.
So basically, I get to the camp. Everybody else has orders to go to the city, right? And they say, you're going to the bush because you were our assistant guide and you understand that kind of stuff, and you want to be a pilot. Okay. So anyway, the flying boxcar, they said, basically, I get out of the academy on a Friday. Sunday, I have to be at the airport with all my household belongings. I had a wife and a child at the time, a daughter, and all your car and everything, and just be there at the airport. So I get there and drive the car right up on the ramp. It's just me, the pilot, and the crew chief, and we fly out and take the car off, and we dump everything, and they just leave me on the ramp. Now what do I do? Where's the trooper housing? So I go to Wien Air Alaska was the name of the airline that went in there and said, you know where the trooper housing is? Yeah, it's there. I'm thinking I'm getting a really nice log cabin on the river. It was a single wide trailer that leaked so bad in the storms that it had mold growing down the side of the walls. You could push the paneling and the lights would come on. So that was a nice feature. The guy before me had a St. Bernard, and it had urinated in the whole house, so it was pretty smelly too. So that was my hymn. So I unpack all night. I get a call at 2:00 in the morning. This is Eddie's. I said, what's Eddie's? The bar. And I said, yeah, what do you want? And he said, there's a bar fight. Come quick. And I said, well, I'm Fish and Wildlife. And he said, did they tell you that? Did they not tell you you're also city police? And you're the trooper? And I said, no. And they said, get here right away. I said, okay. So I go there, and there's a guy with a shotgun. He had a fight with some people, and he pulls a shotgun at me. I said, they get you so bolstered up at the academy that no one would ever mess with a trooper, got a badge and everything. He didn't see it that way. So that was my first night on the job. That's when I realized there's more to this job than flying around in Super Cub as a wildlife trooper. So at that point, I needed to get it was required you have 200 hours in a private pilot to fly for the state. And you started out in the Super Cub, and as you got more hours and more ratings, you could move up to a 185 in other airplanes.
So this whole time your expectation was that you would start flying. Like that was your goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I bought a fish and game biologist convinced me to buy a tailorcraft. He knew the guy. Well, it turns out I knew nothing about airplanes, so I went and bought it, flew it back. First experience. I mean, I'd never had flown a nosewheel plane, so I knew what a tail dragger, how to fly a tail dragger. So I got it back, and I got a local CFI that was a mechanic, and he was going to give me lessons. And he went out to it, and he got about 5 feet from it. And said, "I'm not getting in this airplane." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, it's got hardware bolts holding the wing struts on. It's the first thing I see." I said, "Oh, that's not good, huh?" Anyway, the plane was such a piece of junk. I ended up selling it and bought a Cessna 140, and that's what I got a lot of hours. And then I bought a 180 after that, and that's what I really got my training in. But I did all my touch and goes. I would take off from King Salmon, which was a big, they had F4s that worked out there, so it was a big airport. And I would go out and do all my touch and goes on the beaches of the Alaska Peninsula. So that's where I learned to fly, and I got 200 hours in the first year. I flew every minute I had off work. I flew, building hours. And went to Anchorage and got my wings the first year on the job.
What did it look like once you were qualified to fly? Everything that you did it include an airplane or?
Well, pretty much. Before I actually got my wings with the state, I had the 180, and so to build hours, I would haul freight because we had camps. They had a couple camps down the Alaska Peninsula. So during hunting season, we'd work out of these camps. So I would haul freight in my 180 just free for the state so I could build hours.
Oh, wow.
So I really helped build hours that way. I mean, I paid for it all myself, but at least I could get hours. It was kind of unofficial, off the books, but I was able to do it. And so there were no roads there in the bush. The only roads were between King Salmon and the town of Naknek, which is 13 miles down the road. And that was it, dead end, and everything else was by airplane. So you had calls or any type of patrols. It was all by airplane.
So you were doing cargo in the 180.
Yeah, and then as soon as I got my wings, I was flying the Super Cub all the time. So, and we had hundreds of miles to go down the Alaska Peninsula, but it was incredible because we'd go to these villages and do patrols and stop in the villages for whatever it was, from moosicides to homicides, whatever it was, we'd respond to.
Moosicides, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I remember one of my first trips, flew down there, and I saw caribou, and I saw more caribou, and for like an hour, a trail of caribou going across the peninsula. 21,000 caribou in that herd.
Oh my goodness.
And they were all like single file. And that was one of the most dramatic things I saw as far as my first year on the job is with wildlife. This is really cool. So Alaska Peninsula was really kind of a neat place to be at the time.
You sent me a text and you said, one thing we troopers would say about the job is there are some days, like patrolling on a rare, beautiful day in a perfect airplane without an incident, we shouldn't be paid. And other days, they can't pay us enough for what we have to do. I feel like there's a lot of stories for that second part. Other days, they can't pay us enough. What were your first impressions when you started using the airplane for work?
Well, I think for that case, for example, for that day with the caribou, I mean, that was one of those magical days, you know.
Yeah.
So a bear with 4 cubs, and one of them was obviously adopted because they're a lot smaller, and things like that. This is just a wonderful job. And then the next day we would have, for example, the first winter on my job, I get a call from my village. Then it's a search and rescue. They say it was search and rescue. The teacher and her husband are missing. They've gone missing. And I'm talking native talk though. That's how they've gone missing. And that's what they tell us. They said, well, okay, do you have a snow machine I can use? And they said, you won't need one. Well, that sounds ominous. I don't know what that means, but it was blowing like crazy. And probably about 40 degrees. So there was ice on the runway with water on top of it and blowing about 40 with about a 30 degree crosswind. And I'm a low time pilot. I have to go in
I see
there.
no problem.
No, it was very exciting. And I get there, and this 14-year-old kid because they wasn't allowed to drive the pickup truck. They'd turned him down because it was buried in 6 feet of snow. He wanted to drive their pickup truck with the teacher and the husband. Husband was a postmaster, and this was a little village, like 40 people. He killed them both, shot them in front of the kids, drugged their bodies, and took it and put it into a meat shed. And so now I have to follow the trail of broken eyeglasses, blood, purple blood, red blood, down a trail. And I see this building that's their old food cache where they put meat in, you know, and I didn't want to open the door because I knew what was in there. Anyway, it stuffed bodies in there.
Oh my.
So that's a flying adventure, a day that, one of my first worst days, I would say. That was probably the first worst day.
Was that fairly early on?
That was my first year.
How old were you?
26.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So those are the days I'm talking about. Another time we got in an aerial shooting. In fact, I've got my plaque there. It has a little blue thing on there that was awarded to our unit where a guy had already killed 8 people. And we'd gone in the Cub and found him in a slough. He'd stolen the boat, killed the whole family, stole the boat, and went into a slough and couldn't get out of it. It was a dead-end slough. So we got him with the Super Cub. So this guy was an excellent shot. He used the same kind of rifle that shot Lee Harvey Oswald used to kill Kennedys, and he was really good at it. Military marksman. And so we thought, okay, we're high enough because he's got the gun pointed at us. So he starts shooting at us, and I didn't realize he could connect at that altitude, but he could hit the plane, turns out. So we pulled up and got out of the way, and I can't get a beat on him out of the Cub. It was bumpy, and I couldn't take him out. Well, by that time, we had the helicopter from Fairbanks and the helicopter coming up from Anchorage, which was a 3-hour flight in a helicopter, but they were just 20 minutes away. We had 2 SWAT teams on the helicopters, with just 3 guys each. But so I said, hey, we can land on the Gravois, the Cub. The helicopter's going to land on either end of it, and we got this guy. We can take him out. No problem. He's not coming alive. We already accepted that. Well, for some reason, the captain of the helicopter, the captain who was just riding along in plain clothes and not prepared for the mission, like the rest of us were all at least dressed for the mission with our ballistic stuff, he decided he was going to be in charge, and he didn't want to listen to us. And we were lower rank. So he decided to take this helicopter and go right in at this guy. And the guy shot my buddy through the neck, came at the back of his head, killed one of my buddies. And then another friend of mine shot him, took him out, killed him. So that was 9 people he killed he shot him. That was probably my worst day, I would say.
Wow.
Just kind of one of those stupid things.
Tell me about the McCarthy shootout.
That was a horrible day to go into that. It was a real tactical thing because the guy was on the airstrip shooting, and I had to land the 185 short of his position, which I was loaded with a SWAT team, and I had to land it in 400 feet and turn around and get off so I could get in the trees before he could take us off. And had a really good shot. And anyway, we got him. So those were probably the worst 2 days of flying. There are evil people in this world, and bad things happen to good people. And so I think you see a lot of that in law enforcement. My first body was in King Salmon, was like my second day on the job, and it was a drowning victim. And I pulled him out of the water, and any place but bodies in King Salmon, except the freezer that Fish and Game have where they put their fish, or the cooler. So I put him in there. Well, this guy looks familiar, and turns out I knew him from Talkeetna. And then his family comes and talks to me. He's a kid I knew in Talkeetna. So. Yeah, so I mean that's not a bad person. That was a good person. He just drowned. But people do. It's amazing the evil people that do harm to people. I was telling you, this thing going on right now with Savannah Guthrie's mom. Yeah. I had a case very similar to that. And I was telling my wife about this the other night because it was very similar. I mean, I'm not sure what happened with the Guthrie case, but what happened with this is these 3 guys and a girl kidnap a guy and his mother, take him to the ATM. They leave the mother in the car, and the son goes in and has to draw a lot of money out. And they said, "Don't worry, we'll release you." Well, they didn't release him. They took him out of Anchorage up to Palmer up a road, and this is in the winter. They had him kneel down, and they killed them both, shot them both. And they had Uzis. That was their gun of choice, for Uzis. So anyway, I have nothing to do with this case, right? I'm way out in Glen Allen. Well, I'm doing a night patrol on the road to Lake Louise, which is off the Glen Highway, which goes away to America from Anchorage, basically. It's the main road out of the state. And because people have been shooting caribou at night. So I'm there 10 o'clock at night. And I go down this road, and I see some tracks down there. And I said, "Oh, heck with it. I'm not going to go down there tonight." They look like, it'd been snowing. Looks like they may be day old. I wasn't sure. So kept on and went back. Well, what that was is these 3 guys and a girl were at this pullout, a gravel bar, and she had the instructions. She had 2 Uzis sitting on, they have plenty of Uzis. She was sitting on a blanket with instructions that if a wildlife trooper comes down this road, because we know it's patrolling, I don't know how they knew that, shoot him. And it was my lucky night. But anyway, what the mission was that night, they had convinced this guy that the state troopers in Alaska were corrupt, and we dealt in illegal diamonds from the mafia. This was pretty bizarre. So this was a hiding spot for the diamonds. They convinced this guy. Well, the only reason they did that, I took him down to shoot him. So they killed him. They blamed it on me. They said that I went down the road and shot him. As bizarre as that sounds, I had to go to Anchorage and be interviewed just so they could take me off. Just like they're doing the Guthrie, they're eliminating all the family. They eliminated me, saying, "You didn't kill the guy, did you?" No. But what was ironic is I have to go search for the body in the spring, and I found it with the plane because ravens found it for me. But it's food. I see ravens, and then there's body and about 40 pounds of goo by that time. But so that's a kind of bizarre things. Alaska has what we call the end of the roaders. We would go up there because they failed every place else in America, and they go up to the end of the road.
End of the roaders?
And do that crazy stuff.
So did you ever want to quit?
Yeah, I did. I went to Maui one time, and I said, I'm gonna join the Maui Police Force, and then I saw the pay difference. It was pretty bizarre, but I know you shouldn't go to paradise and think you can live there and be happy. It's different.
Right. Different set of problems.
You're not going to afford a place on the beach,
right,
where you want to be.
Right.
And so I wised up to that. But yeah, there were a couple times I thought, this is crazy work.
How many years did you put in up there?
20.
Was your retirement planned and you knew that your last day of work?
No, yeah. Yeah, I did my 20. Basically, I went to Bethel, and part of the reason I went to Bethel is my position was being moved. I was investigator in Fairbanks, and they were eliminating some positions, budget cuts. So I had a choice going between 3 different posts, and I think Cordova was one, and Yakutat or Bethel. Well, Bethel was also the armpit of Alaska. It's a horrible place to be, but the pay was so much better because they pay you an increment of steps when you go out to horrible places. And so I knew that I'd make more money and to go to my retirement based on your high 3 years. So okay, I will take Bethel. Not knowing what Bethel is like, I go to Bethel and I work 6 months with 2 days off, and because I was flying all the time, because it's 54 villages with no roads. Plus, I was in charge of wildlife, which I had all the way up to Kotzebue. Plus, one summer I was in charge of the drug unit, so I did all the undercover drug stuff. They're called the Western Alaska Narcotics Team, where we have a lot of illegal drugs going on in the villages and bootlegging. So I did that. So I worked, 2 days off in 6 months. So it was pretty intense.
You're in Bethel, and you are responsible for checking in on 54 different villages. Each village has its own strip.
So yeah,
Really?
pretty much, yeah. So, and they're terrible strips. Like the first time I go in there, I went out to look for housing, and they say, "Hey, jump in a 206, and we got to go." It's like, 4:00 in the morning. I go to the village. They had a arson. A kid set the school on fire. So I land on this strip, and I fly over the strip, and I said, "It's underwater." Yeah, it's okay. The guys land here like that all the time. I said, "How deep is this water?" Oh, it's not very deep. Well, I land because there's no gravel out there, right? They can't get gravel to the strip. So I land on the strip, and it's just mud and water. It comes all up over the, up to the wings and over the windshield, windscreen, and you just have to keep the power on all the way up like a soft-filled taxi all the way till you find the one spot that has any gravel, and that's up on the ramp. And then you get there, and that's the only time you can stop. You got to keep the engine running the whole time because you'll sink in the mud.
So how'd you get out of there?
Same thing. You get your power going on the ramp, and then it's like a soft field, and you just get there and you splash some water going down the strip, and just hope you can get off.
Oh, geez.
But yeah. So anyway, it's a different kind of flying, but that's everything. You're responding to emergencies mostly to all the villages. So what I would do, I'd be up at 4, and we do wildlife patrol for the Yukon River and the Kuskokwim River. And that's talking about doing 200 seaplane landings on the Yukon River in a day and 185 and checking fishermen. At night, I remember one time at night I boarded a big tender because we wouldn't, if there was a violation, we didn't seize the fish. We'd meet them at the tender and get the fish ticket was made out to the state of Alaska and to the fisherman. And then if he lost in court, which he always did, they always did because we caught him big 2 hours for the official opening or whatever. But you'd have to get this tender. And I remember one time it was pure dark on the Yukon, and the water was so fast, and he was in a slough, and I hit by myself in 185, and I yelled at this native guy to grab the wing, but they didn't. They said they were going to, and they didn't the last minute, and the plane swings into the superstructure, and the wing hits the superstructure. It's just kind of going like, mm-hmm. And now fortunately, it didn't do any damage. But I had to take off at night on the Yukon. So that's kind of stuff we did for wildlife stuff, the fisheries, and then at night, we'd start getting calls in the villages because the natives, especially during the fishery season, they'd get a lot of alcohol, or made homebrew, or get drugs, or sniff gas, or whatever they did to get high, and then they'd get their guns. And everybody had guns, so then the ruckuses would start, people to shoot each other, or shoot up the village, or kill somebody, and it was usually very violent when they killed somebody. It wasn't just a bang. And so now at night, go to the villages for those kind of problems and haul prisoners back. So pretty much nonstop.
200 landings a day, you said?
Mm-hmm.
So essentially you're taking off from one boat, landing on next to another boat, and you keep the engine running the whole time?
No, you pull up to it. We didn't have nice floats,
Right.
We had boat beater floats, so just bang into the boat, and check them, and if they were okay, we'd go on to the next one. But
wow.
I remember one night I got a call. They had 2 troopers, and they were in Super Cubs, and they were chasing a boat. He was way before the fishing, and he wouldn't give up. And the Super Cub would try to land next to him on the step, and the boat would ram. So they call me, and I have the fast plane. I have my choice of plane that a 185 Super Cub or 206 in the hangar at Bethel, old unheated military hangar, but
all on floats.
No, the 206 was wheels, and 185 was on floats, straight floats, and the Cub was on tender tires. So raced out and got on the float plane, and so now I'm intercepting him, and we're on radio, and we're chasing this guy, and he's not giving up. He's smashing into. Well, finally, we corner him, and I get him with the 185, because like he can't outrun the 185. So we finally get him and catch him. Well, the reason why he was running, he was bootlegging, selling booze to the villages. The girl that was with him was like 14, and he was raping her,
geez.
the whole time for the last year or so, and plus he had a warrant for him. So I mean, those are the kind of characters we had. They weren't just innocent fishermen. They were running. They usually had all kinds of other problems with them.
Wow. Would you do it again?
No.
Really?
No.
Oh. So if you could go back to...
Stayed in law school.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's one of those careers I'm really glad I did.
But you wouldn't do it again?
No, and I don't... And
I was about to ask you, like, so for anybody that's looking into, a career in Alaska law enforcement, what would you... say? But it sounds like you would say don't do it.
No, I didn't say. I wouldn't say don't do it. If you want an adventure,
yeah,
and it's a great adventure. It really is. I mean, you'll have the adventure of your life, like I did. I mean, I did things I just had no idea. I had no really interest in law enforcement. I was going to be an attorney, but I took an aptitude course, aptitude test, to see what I had an aptitude for, what career, just for fun. And they said, "Oh, you should be doing law enforcement outdoors." I said, "Well, first of all, I'm a city boy from Dallas, so I thought it was so bizarre." And I said, "Law enforcement." I had fun getting traffic tickets just so I could practice in court. Never lost my own case when I was in pre-law school. I thought that was fun, So I had no interest in law enforcement beyond that side of it. So, and that's what I ended up doing. It was really kind of bizarre.
Yeah, that's funny.
But no, I think it was like Riley, young Riley. He asked me, he wanted to be a trooper, and I said, well, first of all, he's too nice of a guy and too slight a build. I'm not a big guy either, but Riley is, 5 inches shorter than me and a lot lighter. You get kicked around a lot in the villages, So that's when we learned verbal judo, where you better learn to talk a guy down, because they're going to kick your ass. If you go to the village and they're $80 after you, and you're the one guy, you better be able to charm them.
Was that common? Like, would you be throwing fists?
No, that didn't happen too often, because one thing I did very smart, I think, and another thing I happened onto, I wasn't planning on it, I became a defensive tactics instructor when I was in Fairbank. And because I found myself, if you get into a fight, you better have the advantage if you're smaller. So I ended up being an instructor for defensive tactics. So that really helped me. It just got my confidence up quite a bit. So when I went out to Bethel, for example, they had just taken some troopers hostage in a little village. And it was a real bad scene. They were going through the Wounded Knee thing and all this crap, which really had no application in Alaska. But what
do you mean, this Wounded Knee?
When they had that protest in Wounded Knee and somebody got shot, and so it was over native rights. Well, Alaska really didn't have that problem out in the villages. It didn't steal their lands. They don't want their land, pretty ugly land. It wasn't the same problem with reservations that they had there. But they took that out of boredom, I think. And so they decided that the state troopers couldn't go on to their villages and use their airstrips. And we couldn't, for the big cases out there, other than shooting, are what are called SAM cases, sexual abuse of minors. So it'd be, and I'm talking infants. I'm talking about little kids, because it was just a perversion of those villages. So we would have to go in there and arrest somebody like that. But they decided they would handle that under tribal justice. And we said, no, that's state law. We got to get that offender out of the villages so he doesn't reoffend. And so they took some of our guys hostage. That's when I went, was right after that. That's when I went out there. So I had a special pack design for going, because I knew what my job was going to be, really. So one of them, I was a PR-24, which is a baton with a handle on it, on one side, and the other side I had my M16. So I'd go to the villages, and the appearance was fairly threatening. It's kind of like, I guess maybe like the ice guys or the mask. We didn't do that, but you go there and you're kind of like, okay, this guy means business.
I can choose this one.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, it's like, which one do I need today? Which one's going to be the mission? And so you kind of go in there and you have the presence, but then you be real nice to people. You respect them, even though they just done the most horrible thing. You just show them respect, because quite often it would be me and a prisoner in the 185 going home, going to jail, and they knew they weren't getting out. They knew what was going to happen. So I shackled them to the floor, but I still was real nice to them. I didn't. I didn't want them causing a ruckus, and why be mean to them? And why?
Right.
That's not my job. My job's
Right.
to effect arrest. So I always showed them with the courtesy I could, and that worked out well for me. I one time happened on to a event, and this was in Glen Allen, and I was going down this thing, checking guys that were using fish wheels. It was one of my wildlife days. And I went down there, and there was this camp, and I said, well, this is interesting. I went into it, and it was the Hells Angels. They call them the Brothers in Alaska, but it's the Hells Angels of Alaska. There were 80 of them. They surround my truck. It's just me. I said, well, this isn't good. That river is really
Anyone?
off the cliff. It's really going fast there. And so I said, hey, guys, can I check your permit? Anyway, whatever it was. Well, turns out one of the guys was named Dirty Dave Gonzalez, and he was the vice president of the Hells Angels of Alaska. And I recognized him because I just wanted to post
His rap sheet.
And his brother happened to be a state trooper. I said, hey, by the way, there's a warrant for you. I'm going to have to take you with me. He said, do you see what you're surrounded
See
by?
the other 79, my homeboys here.
Yeah. And he said, I don't think so. And I said, well, I think it's probably be a really good move for you. And let me explain why. He said, well, why? By that time we were on Dave and Mike terms, we're first name basis. Told him I knew his brother. And so we're now broke the ice, and we're talking nice, and I'm getting him to laugh, I try to use humor as much as I could. And so I said, well, because as soon as you leave on your Harley, you're going to get stopped. You're going to get arrested. You're going to go to jail. Your bike's going to be seized, impounded, and it's going to be embarrassing for you. And you spend the night in jail. I said, come with me. I'll call the judge. He'll meet you there. And it's just a misdemeanor. You'll be cut loose on bail. So it's your choice. Or you could kill me, I guess.
That's what you do.
So he went with me. Yeah.
And is that all he got? Was it just a night in jail?
He didn't do a night in jail. He was able to bail out.
Really?
Yeah. It was just a misdemeanor. So, but
Huh.
I felt like for some reason I felt like it was my duty to exercise
Take
that
on
warrant.
80 people,
Yeah.
test your luck.
Well, that was
Yeah.
kind of a fun thing. Do you want me to tell you another story? How I got to be claustrophobic?
Yeah.
Okay. So we get a call, and this is from one of the villages, and these two fishermen were missing. Okay. And last seen drunk leaving the village. And so we searched and couldn't find them. And then one day we get a call from a fisherman. I found their boat, and I think they're in a cave. Okay. It'd been washed up in a cave with the tide. So in Alaska, they have some native troopers, and we had an Eskimo trooper. Well, I didn't realize that the reason they hire them really is so they can translate for us, because some of the villagers either don't speak English or they act like they can't speak English. You go to the village. And so they could speak Yupik, and I couldn't speak much Yupik. It's a difficult language. So I would take him with me. So we go there to this cave, and they're in the cave. They're in there about 10 feet in this cave, and it's a real shallow cave. You can't stand up on it. You got to crawl. So I said, well, let's go and get him. He said, I can't. And I said, why? And he said, it's my superstition. I can't touch dead bodies. And I said, I've touched 5 dead bodies in the last week. You can't touch dead bodies. Now you're telling me that. Well, I'll stay and watch for the tide. And I said, okay. So I have to crawl into this cave, and it is so dark and so cold. And Phil, and I found a boot and body. Now they're covered in sand because the tide had been washing for a week, and they're bloated because they're decaying, and the clothes are full of sand. So now I got to dig with my hands to get sand out, and I pull one guy out, and he's heavy. I pull one guy out, just inching out. Now I got to go back and get another one. I get into about halfway in, and you can't move your shoulders. You're just stuck. You're just cramped. And the Eskimo trooper says, "Hey, Mike, the tide's coming in pretty fast. It's a real fast tide there." And I said, "Oh crap, that's not good." So now I have to wiggle even faster and to get this guy and unstick him, and he's really stuck because he's way in. His head's stuck, and pull him out and waddle out just as the water's coming in. Well, now I got to get him in the 185, and the trooper won't touch the bodies. That's when that first screwed up my back really good.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like throw him in the 185 and take him back, and he never touched him. So I got to be, so I can't do an MRI after that because that was in a cold, dark cave.
Oh. How many of the stories in the books that you wrote, a lot of those stories are essentially what happened to you, right?
They are. We did that in the book. We changed names and changed locations and added I don't know what we really added, but we tried to deflect from the real persons, and we changed the location, changed the names of it, because my editor was an attorney. I don't know if you ever knew Cholet Patrick from the press, but yeah. So she's a pilot. So Cholet was a pilot, an attorney, and an editor. So she was really good, but she advised me that. She said, "You're going to get sued if you use the real name and location. So try to change it as much as you can for that." But other than that, all the stories are true. And also, she said, have an underlying story. If you novelize it, because it was too fresh at the time. I hadn't been retired that long, like 5 years, and all the people are still alive. And so that's why I had an underlying bad guy in the book. It was after Jack. But yeah, all the cases are my cases. I involved in every one of them.
The story of you landing on the 185 short with the guy shooting at you, isn't that in one of the books?
So that's one I went into the cabin, a beautiful log cabin that overlooked the glacier and the mountains. And this sweet old couple, like Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus, ran they had like a little cafe and the post office, so people would go to get their mail. And this guy just came in there and shot everybody getting their mail and shot them that day. And so we go there, and I mean, there is blood all over the place, and go into the kitchen, their brains falling off onto the wood stove and the counters, and two guys coming from Anchorage said, "Oh, we're going to make lunch. You want anything?" So that was in the book. Now, in the book, I have Jack chasing them on sled dog. Well, in reality, we arrested the guy, and we borrowed a helicopter from Alaska. Security, they would loan us their helicopter, and then we would patrol the pipeline in exchange. So got really, really lucky. The guy, after he shot all these people, was on the run. And it was in the winter, so it was cold. So they had an Alaska pipeline helicopter flying. He thought it was just Alaska, and he was going to commandeer it. So he had a machine gun on his handlebars of his snow machine. It was AR-15, I think. And he thought he was just going to commandeer it and get his ride out of there, escape. It turned out to have two troopers in it.
Oh,
they had their parkas on. So that was an easy arrest. In the book, I had Jack chasing by sled dog just because I wanted to work my sled dog into it. So, yeah, but that was a real case. The first case in Bethel, that was again in the middle of the night. It was the same thing at King Salmon. I was unpacking, and Jill wasn't there. Jill had got off the airplane in Bethel and started crying. She couldn't believe there was any place that wasn't a third world country. It was like Bethel. She said, "I'm gonna go see my mom for a couple of weeks." And so I was working on unpacking everything and building shelves till wee hours. And I get a call, "Hey, Mike, we need you to fly the plane." And we had like 7 troopers in the post. And so I said, "Well, what kind of plane is it again?" "Is it 206?" And I said, "Well, I've rated in a 207. 185, but never flown a 206. So I have to wake up the aircraft supervisor in Anchorage. "Can I do whatever you want? I'm going back to sleep." So we jump in this plane, and a guy had shot his brother, killed him. They were what porn movie to watch, and he'd taken off in the village with a gun. taken off in the woods. So we know we have to get there. Well, the VPSO got him, I think, and kind of had him with any escape from him. And we didn't know all this. We were en route by the time he escaped again. But anyway, I get in the 207. The troopers are laughing at me. You're flown with these heavy. I said, no, but we'll figure it out. So I'm reading the manual as we're taxiing out. Come on, we got to go. We get it out of this cold hangar and got to start up real quick. And I'm reading the manual. And they said, well, where are we going? No, we'll show you upriver. And it's crappy weather, low visibility. I've never flown an airplane before, but okay, I know the speeds. That's it. That's what I need. So we get really scud run the whole time. Get to the village, and now this guy, brother is a mess. I mean, he shot him right in the chest. It was a horrific scene, blood everywhere in the kitchen. And go get him from the VFS. Oh, he got loose. So now we have to go chasing this guy through the brush of Alaska and along the river in the darkness. And he had all kinds of places he could have shot us. I mean, we're below him on the riverbank, and he was up here. And we get to this camp, and it's this black guy. Well, I didn't know they had any blacks out in the village. It's pretty rare. And he was a big, big black guy. And he comes out of the village and says, he turned out to be the postmaster from the village. Super neat guy. And I said, have you seen? Yeah, he came barreling into our tent with a gun. I grabbed the gun and threw it at him and kicked his tail out of the camp. And I said, well, where'd he go? I think he went back to the village. So now we have to trace him back and find him. The trooper I'm with drops his M16 in the sand. And I said, well, that's good as an M16 because then we can wash it in the river. So we washed it out. So we had our guns. Anyway, goes back to the village, and he had passed out, fortunately.
Oh, geez.
So now we have the brother that he's killed, and we put him in a body bag, and it was so much blood. Blood was all over the bag. I have him sitting next to us in the 206 in the back with the brother next to him who had just shot him. And he starts waking up and sobering up on the way back, starts crying. Couldn't believe what he did. So it was pretty tragic.
My goodness.
That was my first flight in Bethel, much like the one in King Salmon, the bar fight. So same thing, like, wow, what have I done? What am I in Bethel? So Jill came back, by the way, and she ended up running the trooper's office for a minute. She started out as a clerk, and the one girl said, as a Navy girl, said, I don't really want to be boss. So Jill ended up running the trooper's office because she'd done that in Fairbanks. She had been a clerk up there, so she kept really busy. She did all the reports and all that kind of stuff, and kind of dispatch and evidence, which there was a lot of. I got in my first truck. There was a pair of panties with a red tag on it. I said, "Oh, what's this for?" We ran the numbers. A rape case. I said, "Well, again, shouldn't this be in the evidence locker?" Jill gets up in the roof, and they had just stashed all this cocaine up there because they didn't. No one had the key to the evidence locker one day, and they finally forgot about it. And then she found, I don't know, $100,000 in cash, and drug deals, and then all this booze that they had to take out with the native trooper, who was an alcoholic, by the way, and run it all over in the dump. He's just crying the whole time. And anyway, so Jill ended up taking skin sewing classes and fish netting and everything. So she actually had a pretty good adventure there. We became really good friends with a friend of mine that was Alaska Airlines, ran the Alaska Airlines office there, the airport office. And now he flies to Maui and for Alaska Airlines. But at the time he was just running around. So she ended up having a good time out there.
That's cool.
But I wouldn't come home for days. I'd be out in the village and just not come home. If we lived right by the airport, and she could see I said, if you see the blue lights, that's the taxi lights, I can get in because I know I got a quarter mile. And so we had flight phones in the plane. You couldn't file alternates because there are no IFR alternates except Anchorage, 499 miles away. So you went to village, only place was to come back because it had an ILS at Bethel. And ILS is right off and everything. So they had a flight phone in the airplane, and I could call Jill, and I said, can you see the lights? And she said, yeah, okay, I'm coming in. I sit down and call her next time, can you see the lights? She said, no. I said, well, I'm coming in. So my last time I went there was a blizzard, and I'm coming to 185. It's just a solid blizzard, and I come in and there's nothing. I never saw the runway, just kind of like you were talking about. I mean, not that you do that, but in my case, I landed and didn't know I was on the ground until I could feel the wheels touch.
Oh, wow.
And then I had to shut down it had a tower going and called the tower and said, "Can I shut down for a minute on the runway?" And he said, "Yeah, why do you need to?" And I said, "Because I need to find a taxiway. I can't see anything. It's snowing so hard." So I have to walk out and walk down until I can find the taxiway. Now I could follow my tracks in the snow to get on. That was my last landing there. So, yeah, I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore.
Jeez. So when did you move to Coeur d'Alene?
1997. So it'll be 30 years next year. Yeah. Yeah, and in the airport, you asked about the airport. The airport was so quiet back then. Jill and I, every Sunday, we'd walk all the runways for FOD. We'd pick up FOD. That was our fun job off the runway. And I ran the flight school here, and we bragged that we got our students up to 22 students. You know, that was a big deal. You know, I saw someday I do a Bible study on my treadmill. It's called Bible Study Treadmill in the morning.
Bible study treadmill
on YouTube. I'm on my treadmill, and today this preacher said something kind of interesting. He said that an average lifespan now is 78 years, and over that 78 years, the normal person, average person, influences 80,000 people. Well, I don't see how that can be possible when I was out in the bush, but they're talking about not just influence, but maybe you meet somebody in a store and you're nice to them, or walking or whatever, talking to a person. So that's kind of interesting. So my last few years, as my window closes on flying, I figure I can get all of these young people, at least take them for a seaplane flight, take them down to the camp, and take them for a hike.
Yeah,
maybe do some photography.
Tell me more about that, the camp.
So 2 years ago, when Mark died, right after Mark died, Buck Bender died. Mark, of course, got killed, and Buck Bender was, he flew the, I've got pictures of him. That's his plaque there. Buck flew the F-4 Phantom in Vietnam. Really a neat gentleman, retired lieutenant colonel. And when he died, Buck was instructing while you were, so you may remember him. Yeah. So he lived in a beautiful house overlooking.
Yeah, at the top of the road there.
Yeah.
By the trailhead.
Yeah. And so his wife wanted a divorce, or wanted to leave him. So she left him and moved to Spokane. But Buck, being the gentleman that he was, didn't divorce her so she could have his military benefits.
Oh, wow.
So he had a girlfriend named Annie, who's a real sweetheart. Annie's like 90 now. And they were seriously in love. And he was at her apartment and walked out and fell and had a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
So we went to Buck's apartment in our condo, and had mold everywhere. And his cat been peeing, and dog, and it was just disgusting. And he'd been breathing all that stuff. I was sick for like a week. I couldn't talk. I mean, just being in it.
Really? And
because we cleaned it all out and got it ready for resale. But so we think that's got Buck's respiratory system.
Oh, wow.
And anyway, so Buck's wife was terrible to deal with during the whole thing. She just didn't care about him. And his ashes, it took us a year to get his ashes from English Funeral Temple. And the only reason we did is because Rachel from the museum, led the effort. And the wife wouldn't sign off so he could be buried in Arlington. So Rachel finally got him and took him to Arlington. But Annie, the girlfriend, gave us $15,000 to start this foundation. So now we have a foundation. And like last month, we gave one guy $1,000, one young man $1,000, and gives him 4 hours of flying. Not much these days, but at least something. And I'm just sent an email to Lightspeed to see if they'll give us a headset or give me a discount on one anyway.
Oh, cool.
Because we have a 501c now. And so if somebody just says, "Hey, I want to go for a flight in the Cub," with no real purpose, they just want to go flight, and I say, "Well, I can't really do that on a commercial, but if you want to donate to our 501c, give it, whatever, we could do that." So I've done a few of those. I don't know where it's going to go from here, but I think for our little foundation, we can at least, and I chip in, I pay for a lot of it myself. We don't really have a whole lot of money. We haven't spent much money out of the foundation, but we're going to get them a headset and leave us a little bit to get us through the summer, and then I buy the gas and do the plane expense myself. But we'll just take them for a flight down to the camp, or like Adventure. I took this one young guy up to Lake Pend Oreille to the ghost town at Lakeview. You've never been there, have you? There's a real pretty beach there, and you walk up to this old town, and it's like part of the buildings are like they left it 120 years ago or whatever. The guy who delivers the mail, he does it by boat, and he goes from Bayview to there.
Okay.
But the town, it's just amazing. These places like this, and they had a hotel called the Hotel Swastika.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Nothing to do with Hitler, because Swastika means good luck in German. You know, I mean, it's a good luck charm, and so it was way before Hitler, of course. And that's burned down now, but a lot of the older buildings are still there. And I did an article for Idaho Magazine on it.
Oh.
Just because I'm fascinated with the history. Like 11 people live there year round, and then summer people come in, but just a neat town. So I took them up there. If you get on my YouTube channel, I did a video on it.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Called
Let's
Trip
check
to
that out.
Ghost Town or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But so anyway, I do stuff with these young people, and then like Mike Kralik, do you remember the police officer got shot in the face and paralyzed? Took him for a flight. Took 4 of us to get him out of the Cub because he's paralyzed on the side. You know. So do some of those honor flights, and then some veterans and that kind of stuff. So we'll keep doing that this summer.
And then the other thing I want to talk about too, your stunt flying.
You mean for the movie?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about that.
Was it the Frozen Ground?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I heard they were making that movie, well, I said, this. When I read about it, they're kind of taking my book, second book, and kind of elaborating on that. But they're going by using the actual case files, but they're novelizing it too. I said, I really should be involved in this, because I was involved in that case very, very, very minutely, but there's a little bit of involvement in that case. And I wrote a book about it, so I was kind of interested. So I kept pestering them. And finally, I got an interview and a Zoom, before Zoom, but a teleconference anyway. And then it was just great.
With the producer, or
with producer, a couple producers, the director, and then went up to Anchorage and go into a room, and here's all the actors and everybody, and they said, this movie surrounds around the airplane, so I want your input on this. And unfortunately, they didn't use enough. 3 minutes of flying. It was very
there's some good flying clips in there, but
yeah, it was disappointing though, because we flew 200 hours that month. Between
oh my goodness,
not all in the Cub, but I flew in the helicopter a whole lot too, because for selecting sites and finding moose, about at night, flying moose. And like one night we got permission to fly right down the streets of Anchorage in a helicopter, following a police car from the 80s. I mean, so actually, and it was just fun.
Yeah.
They'd call me like, well, you want to go flying tonight? And I said, yeah, sure. And I said, well, am I get paid for it? He said, yeah, you get paid 4 hours. We'll be out about a half hour, stuff like that. And the pay was really good. Then they flew me back and forth first class. I said, I need to go home for the weekend. Okay. Yeah. They were really good to me.
So did you hang out with Cusack and it was Nicolas Cage, right?
Nicolas Cage, though, that Cusack, a little bit. The first night, I don't know if I'll tell you one real quick story. So we're at a gravel bar, and the Hueys coming in, because they went out in a Huey at one time, and so that was in the scene. They kept it really real. So we're getting a safety briefing, and I'm just standing in the back, and I look, like that, like, mustache shaved, hair dyed.
Oh, yeah.
Wearing a costume. I'm with that girl there, wearing a costume like that. And so I'm sitting in the back, and I'm going, okay, safety briefing on the Huey, because I'm going to be flying in a Huey that night. And so I'm building, here's Nicolas Cage, and he's like this, he's looking, he turns around, looks at me, goes, and I'm going, what did I do? And he just, mouthing these swear words at me, and I'm going, okay, I'm sorry. I know. Then he goes and gets the director, and he says, and so the director called me over and said, Mike, this is Nick. And he said, he thought you were the killer. He thought they was taking you out of prison to consult on this scene, and he didn't want anything to do with you.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think you look like the guy?
I looked exactly like him. If you look in the book and look at me,
really, I
look a lot more like him than Cusack, because Cusack's 6'4", and I'm 5'10", and the killer was 5'10".
Really?
So that plane of me in the Cub, that's me on Cusack's left. You see how shorter I am? He's 6 inches taller than me. So, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I looked a lot like the Cub. So there's a
that's funny
place in Anchorage that just specializes in Cubs, and I go in there to get the Cub work done. We're having some mechanical problems, and I go in to get it fixed during the movie. And I walk into this office, and the guy slides back, his eyes get real big, and he pulls back his drawer. I said, I'm Mike. Okay, I heard I'm supposed to talk to you. And he said, you're who? And I told him, he said, I thought you were Hanson. He said, you look just like Robert Hanson. And I said, yeah, I know. I guess I didn't know her that much, but because I had the same clothes he wore. Those are the clothes he wore when he was killing the girl, the same clothes. And looked just like him. And so he said, I was going to shoot you. I thought you came in here to kill me.
That's crazy.
Terrified of him. And so anyway, so yeah, I was. Did I tell you about picking up Jill at the airport? No, it's real quick. Then I know you got to go. So Jill, I invite Jill to come up for filming. We're going to be out shooting with Cusack and Nicolas Cage that day. And it's going to be a good shoot. And I got my stepson in as a state trooper in uniform. And because they gave me not just flying, but then they'd use me for consulting, you know. So I did a lot of stuff on the movie. It was kind of fun. But anyway, so I at the airport, and I'm wearing a black jacket like this, no logo on it, and I'm at the airport, and I'm just standing there, and it's like 6 a.m, nobody there. So I'm just standing there by the baggage check, and my stepson comes, and he's standing right there, and I walk up, and I just stare at him, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Can I help you?" He thought I was TSA harassing him, you know, checking or something. He thought I was law enforcement. I said, "Hey, Jared." And he said, "Where's your mom?" And she said, "Over there." I said, "Let's go talk to her." So I go up there, and she looks at me. She says, "Hi, I'm Jill." And I said, she thought I was the driver. They'd send a driver to take her to the set.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, they did a good job. Yeah.
I gotta watch that movie again.
Not with your kids.
So what clips are you? I mean, all the flying.
Yeah. So
the Cub.
Flying. When you see Cusack flying, I'm hiding in the back. So I've got. He's actually at the front. He's actually manipulating the controls.
Oh.
But I'm in the back doing the real flying. I've got a parka over my head.
Oh.
And they want me to wear a wig and look like a woman. So they got the cameraman to do that, filling, because they needed a woman that day. The woman wasn't gone. So I'm doing all the flying when John's up in front. And then there's one scene at the airport where Cusack's chasing Robert Hansen, or like a 5 mile per hour chase down the ramp, and it's in the snow. That's me in the car. I'm doing the driving.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that's when I met Cusack. I mean,
Cage.
Nick. Yeah. So. Yeah, so I did the driving in the car and then all the flying, and then like one day it was blowing so hard in this canyon where we were doing the helicopter scene. Cage said he didn't want to sit in the helicopter. He was afraid to sit in the helicopter because it was rocking. He's smart, you know. So they yelled at me with the megaphone, "Cage, go switch clothes with Nick." So Nick and I switched jackets, and he gave me his sunglasses and whatever. So that was Nick Cage that day. You know, from a distance, it looked okay. But so now, helicopter sitting there, and it was really rough. It was blowing like 65 in this canyon. I wouldn't fly the Cub that day. I said, "Yeah, I'm not going to fly." Helicopter's going like that. And the director says, "Okay, let's do a pass over the bridge and come fly back down the canyon." I said, "What?" It's supposed to be a static shot. So we did, and we came back, and the helicopter's going like this, you know. And then he said, "Okay, we need one more. We didn't get that. I go, try one more." It was horrible. Nick Cage just laughing. And then one scene when they came back, we didn't have snow, and Cusack went on to another movie, and so then it snowed and snowed and snowed. So we had to get rid of the snow, so we had to hire a crew with Herman Nelsons and shovels to clear out an area, and I would take them wads of $100 bills in envelopes and pass it out to the crew to keep them working. You had like 18 guys, because they had to get rid of every bit of snow.
Right.
And then Cusack's already gone, so I have to play Cusack in that one when they're going back and with the sun and getting rid of some evidence. Yeah, it's kind of a distant shot. You couldn't tell.
I think
The
it would just
crew
be
is
fun to see how they do all that behind the scenes
The
stuff.
precision that they have. I mean, it's just orchestrated. Like, you know, like one day we have this, Cusack takes this gal and he throws her into the Cub, smashes the window out, the side window of the Cub, and the back slider with her head, because he gets into it. He gets into his roles. He's a madman. She's crying, you know, like big crocodiles here. She's so upset, and I can't tell her she's got bruises.
Like for real crying, or she's acting?
So she's crying. Oh, she's acting, but she's also terrified of Cusack. She's like, that's her right there. See that beautiful girl there?
Yeah.
That's her. And then they say, okay, you got to go flying now. You got to take her flying. She goes, what? What in the script? And they said, yeah, but we wrote it down. I said, I've never been in a small plane. So I take her into a hangar and get her to calm down and tell her how much fun this flying is going to be. And don't worry.
You're going to love it.
So they say, this guy from Germany says, "Can I put the camera in the plane?" And so I'm thinking it's, maybe a GoPro. I get there, the whole front seat's a camera, all the way. So where am I going to sit? Well, you got a skinny butt, you can get in there. So we kind of moved it over a little bit. I'm sharing the front seat with a camera, kind of blocking my view and everything. I mean, this camera's huge. And we put her in the back. She's scared. And I'm talking to the director, and the tower, by the way, just gives us free reign. You got the airport, do whatever you want. So we're not really talking to them. We just have to close the airport for us. And so this director says, "Okay, Mike, I want you to do something real exciting on takeoff, because we're going to put snow in this picture. We're going to make it look like it's snowing. We'll add snow later." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" So act like it's really turbulent, rough air. And I want you to go down the runway and pull straight up, make it real exciting. So that's what I do. I go going until I can't stay on the ground anymore, and I yank back on the stick, and we go up like that. And then her eyes are like this big. I mean, if you'll see that in the movie, that's her real reaction. She's not acting.
That's in the movie.
Yeah, she's terrified. So that night, we're all staying in the same hotel at Captain Cook. I see her in the hallway, and I said, she sees me first. She said, "That was a great flight." I said, "Really?" I said, "Man, you clean up nicely, because that's what you look like." She's a beautiful gal. Her dad is Joe Montoya. If you ever heard of him, the actor Joe Montoya. He's the guy that goes around with Sergeant Dan and does the tours around the country for raising money for wounded veterans and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's real big on that.
Okay.
Good guy.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Huh. Thanks, man, for doing this. This
Sure.
is cool. I feel like we barely even touched on where I thought we might go. So maybe in the future at some point, if you've got time,
Sure.
we can do part 2. I feel like there's a lot of Coeur d'Alene specific stuff that we could talk about.
I flipping on the lake.
Well, there's that. Yeah, that. I need to go take pictures of your pictures so I can put them over top of the video. Get some context.
Sure. Do what you want. I'm gonna move this boat back in case Friday's going flying.